All right, everyone. You should have just been received an announcement that the meeting is being recorded. Thanks for joining us today. You're going to see me occasionally be kind of looking around my screen. I'm going to be admitting people as they pop in, log on. Um, if you haven't had an opportunity, do take a moment to type in your name and your MHSA ID number, if you remember it, into the chat box for attendance purposes. And you can do that anytime, and we greatly appreciate that. Today, what we're going to cover is, given the time of year that it is, we're going to cover some challenging situations surrounding technicals, intentionals, flagrant fouls, and some of those challenging, and even fights, some of those challenging situations. How do you administer them? How do you adjudicate them? How do you handle them? How do you keep your own emotions in check, et cetera? And then Jim has some information. He sometimes gets asked questions, and people often ask, how can I, quote unquote, I'm going to use the word move up, whether that's from sub-varsity to varsity, if that's of interest to you, perhaps even from varsity to college, if that is an aspiration of yours as well. And we're going to take a few minutes to just kind of go over that. So again, as a reminder, being recorded, a couple more people joined in. Name and MHSA ID number, if you don't mind, into the chat box. Greatly appreciated. And I'm going to kick things off. And I was talking with Rick the other day, and we were working a game last night, and we were talking about how this time of year, end of January, first week or two of February, depending upon exactly when the season started, you get to the halfway mark where you've played 10 games, you have maybe another 10 games to play. And I like the term Rick used. He said, the die is cast, more or less as a basketball team. Rick, would you kind of maybe explain what you meant by, for most teams, the die is cast?
Well, it gets to a point in the year where those high hopes everyone had at the beginning of the season are no longer accurate. And there's frustration with that, and frustration in a lot of places. It comes from the kids, the coaches, the parents are frustrated. All that behavior usually comes out in negative ways, and we get impacted by it. And so you just have to be aware. I mean, I always look before I go to a game, get an idea of what the records are for the teams and how they've played this year and against who. But that doesn't always tell you everything. Sometimes you'll get there and the tone in the gym will tell you everything you need to know.
Yep. And maybe you had a coach 2 weeks ago and they were fine. It was chill. Maybe they even lost and everything's okay. But now it's this time of year, and maybe the parents are complaining about that their kids haven't gotten enough minutes. Maybe that coach doesn't feel supported by the school administration. And maybe, as Rick said, maybe a player who had high hopes is trying to come to emotional grips that maybe he's just not going to get as many minutes as he was hoping to get this year. All that frustration can just be floating around out there until about mid-February, when they're no longer looking at the schedule and saying, "Oh my God, I have to do this for another 10 games." Now they're looking at it, and maybe it's only four more games, 2 more weeks. Districts are right around the corner. I can keep it together till then. But right now, this time of year, this is what I like to refer to as kind of the dog days of winter. And it is. It's this way for us too. We are going from one gym to another gym. It's bitterly cold. It's bad driving conditions. Um, all the games for us are starting to blur together. So how do we handle that? It's not just about somebody gets a technical foul, the other team gets two free throws, and the ball at half court. There's a lot more to it than that. So we were going to show some clips. Um, I do understand that for some of you, the clips might look a little choppy. Don't worry, we're going to pause a lot and talk about positioning and what to do and how to handle the situations. And even if you're not calling the official, what can you do to be a good partner, for example. And so Rick, Jim, I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to start off with. I was just going to maybe share the first clip from you guys.
No problem.
Go right ahead.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. And I do want to say up front that some of these clips, a lot of the games, if you walk into a gym, you will see up top around half court like some white cameras. They're motion tracking cameras. And as long as they are using the system, it's free. And as long as they punched in the correct date and time of the contests and games, if you pay a subscription fee, I have elected to do that because I like to really be able to watch my games and review it. Watching your games is probably one of, if not the most important tools to improve. A lot of us maybe don't want to. We don't want to see ourselves on camera. Maybe, we're like, oh, I know I kicked that call. What can I learn from it? I already know I blew it. There's a lot you can learn. Even when you think you had a great game, a lot you can learn by watching. Maybe you didn't have quite as good as a game as you thought you did. But if you don't want to get a subscription to it, if you want to email me, shanebuys@hotmail.com, if the game's available, I can run a quick little snippet for you, like I have here, or if it's a longer clip, I can upload it on YouTube. Don't worry, it's an unlisted link. Others can only see it if you share the direct link with them. And any clips that I, share, tonight, either is from out of state, no one's going to know anybody, or I've gotten permission from the officials involved to share. So don't be concerned that I don't want to ask Shane because I don't want to show up in a meeting. I won't do that without like your permission. And so again, this is just a call. And even if they don't have the NFA network, most coaches have Huddle. And there's instructions where you can receive a download link for Huddle. And I'm happy to email coaches or ADs and ask for that. Sometimes it's easier if a third party official says, do you mind sharing the video for training and learning purposes? Here's how to do it. We really appreciate it. So with that little public service announcement out of the way, don't think I'm going to get overwhelmed with requests, but just send it to me if I can help you. I'd love to help you get better. That's the whole goal of the association. So that said, going to expand it here. I'm going to set up the scenario for you. You can see it's early in the game. Home team white is winning, but you'll see that doesn't matter earlier in the second quarter. This is Rick down here. Jim is opposite the table as center, and then I forget who your third was, but they're not necessarily relevant to the conversation today, so that's okay. Rick, I'll let you kind of set the stage for us now. What was going on, and then I'll click play and take it from there.
Okay. The first time down the court, the home team coach was complaining that I was telling the players to get in and out of the lane. And he described it as coaching. And I thought that was a rather odd thing to start talking about up 19-9. But okay, I told him I had just told his players at the other end of the floor the same thing to help them, trying to develop a little flow in a game that was a little choppy at first. So the next time I come down the floor, he's still on that. And I said, okay, I heard you. That's enough. And then there's a knock away at half court. Jim and our third have good coverage on it. The kid, I get to about half court and I can see through the middle and there's no foul whatsoever. Well, coach now, because I asked him, I had heard enough, starts, you got to call that. You got to call that. And so I pass by him again. And then the ball turns over. I'm coming back up the court and I'm in front of the bench. And he says to me, 3 of you out there, all out of position. And you'll see what happens on the film.
Yep. All right. So he's issued a technical foul. He's going to report it. And now I'll let it keep going. I'll let it keep going. Now I'm going to stop it right here though first, because I want to see if anybody in the audience is astute. Now, this is nice because this broadcast has score and quarter and time. Are we in the first half or the second half? We're in the first.
We're in the
This is the
first.
away team bench down here.
We're
Where's this
shooting
kid
the wrong
lining up to
basket.
shoot free throws? He's lining up to shoot free throws at the wrong basket. Fortunately,
Yeah,
Rick is
look at
going
the
on.
Northern coach. He knows.
Yep. He's down there saying, no, 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 no. And then Jim catches it. We're going to shoot down the other end. Because if we had shot the free throws down at that basket, that is officially a correctable error. And fortunately, this is where we talk about being a good partner. Rick has just called a technical foul. He maybe is a little flustered. He's maybe a little frustrated. Maybe he's cool as a cucumber. I don't know. But,
No, I was frustrated.
oh, I believe you. But
Yeah.
as a good partner, you're not calling it. You're the cool, level-headed one. You are there to support your partner in that moment. Jim, can you kind of talk about what some things are as like being a good partner? How are you a good partner when one of your partners calls a technical foul?
Running.
Oh,
Rick gives the tee. He walks over past the table away from the coach and then reports it to the table. If you look at me, I start as soon as Rick tees, I know what's happened because I know the coach involved who is he can be prone to the technical foul, let's just say. I start watching. If you look at Rick, what does Rick do? He walks away. Because if he stays there and stays near the table, that coach is going to keep talking and might get a second technical and an ejection. Rick, knowing that, gets out of the way. He gives a technical, he reports, and he walks opposite the table and gets away. I started to walk in, saw that the coach turned away and that nothing was bad was going to happen. I got the ball. I bounced it over to Dave Drake and then said, "Oh crap, that's the wrong end." Got it back, and we went and shot.
yeah.
So as a partner, when your partner gives a technical to a coach, you want to get in there and make sure your partner's getting away. Now I didn't have to do that because Rick did. Rick being a veteran, knows himself and knows if he stays around, something bad's going to happen. So you go, and if you need to talk a coach off the ledge, because he might still be griping, you go and let him gripe a little bit into your ear. Let him
Yep.
gripe quietly. If
Along
he's
that
making
line,
a scene,
along that
then
line,
you
it's
might
so
have to
hard to
be the one to
see.
give him the second technical and toss him.
Yeah.
But if he's just grumbling, you let him grumble a little, and you say, "Well, all right, Chuck. You got to sit down now. We got to move on and finish the game."
So you can see that the third partner, Rick's opposite the table, is going to be ready to inbound the ball as soon as it's ready. And I myself, if I'm the calling official and I'm there, what I'll do is if there's some team members for red after the first free throw or during the first free throw, I'm going to say, who's inbounding the ball for you? And one of them inevitably will say it's me. And I say, great, stand over here. Because I want to get that ball in efficiently. And so that's one other tip to do. But I want to point out here is if you're the official that's got to go over there, maybe let that coach finally give off a little bit of steam. Oh, I think that was undeserved, or whatever it is. You don't give them a long leash because you don't want to be seen to undercutting the authority of your partner, but you give them a little just to kind of calm down. And what's the one thing that you now have to inform the head coach? Can they still stand and coach? Nope, this isn't college. They have to be seated. And so while you're letting them coach, say, okay, coach, I hear what you're saying. As a reminder, you've lost the privileges of the coaching box. Need you to be seated except for timeouts, etc.
Hey, Shane, I have something. You know how in lots of times we have progressive penalties. And with a coach that maybe you're new to, you've never seen before, you might start out with a 3-step approach where you go and counsel them first, talk to them, try to get them to comply. Then you've got the warning, and then you've got a technical foul if needed. Now, if they're a known offender, you might skip the counseling part and just go to a warning and then a technical foul. If they're if they're a repeat offender where they've done it multiple times in the past, sometimes you just go to the solution, and that's a technical foul.
Yep.
And that's got to be judged on the situation and your experience with the individual coach.
Now, Jim, Rick, is an official giving out a technical foul, is that some kind of moral failing on our part? You know, have we failed as officials if we give out a technical foul?
No, I think sometimes it's the opposite, that we fail if we don't give out the technical foul. You have to keep in mind, this is school sports. It's about sportsmanship, and the coach is a role model for the kids, and he sets a tone for the kids, the parents, everyone in the stands. And if you let the coach go nuts and scream and yell, the players are going to be disrespectful, and the crowd is going to be disrespectful. So,
well, go ahead, Jim.
So, when you have to give a technical, give it to him. But if if this is a coach that's new to you and he hasn't done anything that awful, then yeah, go like Rick says, go and counsel him. And when Rick says counsel, you might say, Coach, we can't have you screaming out calls across the floor. That's unsportsmanlike. All right, you need to stop. Just something calm like that. Tell him that. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. If that doesn't work, or if you know it won't work, so you're going to skip it, then maybe you stop the game and give the official warning to be put in the book. Or in this case, where it was a known repeat offender, Rick went right to the technical. His counseling, the comments Rick made to him before, like, I heard you, coach, that's enough, didn't work. The warning with this person, I think Rick probably thought, and I would agree with him, wouldn't work. So he skipped that step and went to the technical.
Yep, exactly.
Ask yourself the question, will a technical foul make this situation better? 99% of the time it does.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, we fail to address sportsmanship too often. And we get to a point where now it comes back to haunt us. For example, a coach who's yelling travel, yelling for a call every time down the court is telling his bench and his players that you're incompetent, that you aren't worthy of making the right call. Now, what happens? You call something against the kid in the fourth quarter, and he turns around and questions you. Now, you start teeing him in the fourth quarter when you should have got the coach in the first. That's what happens often, is that we create our own problems by not enforcing sportsmanship at an appropriate time, because you get to a point at the end of the game where it gets more difficult to enforce it.
We talk about officiating.
Going back to that, that was second quarter of a game, and it was the coach who was winning with double the points of his opponent. Now, if you let the winning coach get away with that, what do you think the losing coach might do when he has a call he doesn't like? So handle it early, because it usually it never gets better if you don't address it. It only gets worse.
Sometimes, and it seems a little a reverse, but sometimes an early technical foul is actually preventive officiating. Not just a verbal warning or that kind of stuff or talking to them real politely. Sometimes a technical foul early can be preventive. Now, I want to share this next one from this season here. Set the stage for you real quick. We have center opposite. We have a trail table side, and not yet on camera, we have a lead table side. There's going to be a drive by blue. Notice 11 seconds to go here at the end of the first. And White is going to get a really good block on the kid, and he's going to stand over him a little bit. And the lead official, appropriately so, stays with it. And again, I'm saying look at it is early. Now is the time to kind of get these kinds of calls. And I'm just going to let it go on. I apologize if it is going to be choppy for some of us. All right, here's the drive, here's the block. Number 12 kind of stands over, and you can see a little hand gesture. And then our lead gets a technical foul. And you got to stay with the action after the whistle. Now, remember what we talked about. You call the technical foul, especially if it's on the coach, you just go opposite the table. You know, you are almost never going to make the situation better by calling a technical foul on a coach and staying table side. When you call a technical foul on a player, it's a little bit of what I would call an advance move to stay table side and give some information to the coach, because sometimes maybe you're the only one that heard his player cuss somebody out. And all you have to say, especially if you have a relationship with the coach previously, say, John, number 12 told the kid to F off and stood over him. And then that coach, instead of being confused and mad, he's going to be mad at the player and he's going to address it with the player. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. You have to really know yourself and know the players and coaches involved and get a feel for it. So I'm going to let it play out here. Now, what I do like about this situation here is his partners, the clock buzzed. The clock is 0. And so they're going to get together and they're going to say, what do we got? Are we shooting him now? Do we shoot him at the start of the second quarter? Is the first quarter not yet done? They're kind of talking about all those situations, and that's what I like. Now the coach, he's frustrated, but the official, kind of knows him, and he's just kind of giving some information, and the coach is kind of like, okay, I got it. And the player comes over, and this is, maybe I wouldn't call the player over, but, sometimes you got to feel that out. And you give the information. You don't have anything to prove. You do not have to make sure everybody is happy with your call. Give the information, walk away. And they shot the free throws and everything was fine. Now, same game, same contest, and it just so happens the same official. He is going to call a foul against White, and then he's going to report the foul to the table down here, and the coach is kind of standing in front of him. The coach thought he got a offensive rebound, and we call an offensive foul for a push, hold in the back, that kind of thing. Now, I want you to keep your eyes on the head coach. He realizes, oh no, it's going the opposite way. Did we see that? It's where'd it go? That visual wave off. When a coach, visually gives you a wave off, that's one of those where you can't pretend you didn't see it. If you saw it, you get them. That's one of those where 99 of 100 times you're going to have to call a foul. Now, in comparison to the first one, he's going to say something. Why? He told me that. He told him it's because you waved me off. He gave information, reports it, and where does he go? He's going opposite. He's getting away. He's going opposite the table. The film had to cut off, but he walks away because You give a tech to a coach, just get away, you know? So those ones, it's important that those visual cues, it's hard to let those ones go. Jim, Rick, you guys got anything to add about those two ones comparison to yours?
I will just say a wave off by a coach is an automatic technical. There's not even, don't even think, just give it.
Yep. And now notice this is 3:40 to go or something in the fourth quarter in a contested game. I don't care what time it is. It's not
You can let a coach say things to you when you're the only one that hears it, but the whole gym sees him waving you off. You can't tolerate that.
Yep. And again, it's one of those, it's nothing personal. It just is what it is, you know? And so those were the two that I wanted to kind of share in addition to that first one. And everything that we said before about Jim and Rick's experience with that other call hold true here, just slightly different variations and just some kind of tips and tricks. And notice we haven't even talked about 2 free throws and possession at the division line. We haven't talked about those basics. This is about everything else that isn't going to show up on a test as far as the conversation goes. I want to pause right there before we show a couple other videos. Does anybody have any questions as it relates to technical fouls, handling a coach, a player? This time of year, like I said, there's going to be a lot of frustration, and you are going to have it taken out on you guys. Probably very, very likely unfairly, and it is what it is.
Hey Shane, I got a question for you. I had this come up last night. I had a coach that was frustrated that she was losing big, and she's yelling at me at a call that was in my partner's area that I couldn't even see, and I was getting ready to warn her, and I ended up seeing the assistant coach when he decided to pop off. But later in the game, we have a stoppage of play, and she's clearly out of the box arguing, and I teed her up. And I know that in certain situations they're allowed to stand, but I'm thinking that if she's up and out of the box arguing, I don't want to say it's automatic, but it's pretty much a good way to guarantee you get a T.
So Tim, I'm gonna
keep them all week of all this fool.
I'm gonna back up real fast. Let's make sure everybody's aware of the rules. An assistant coach gets a technical foul. Does the head coach lose the privileges of the coaching box?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And so they have to sit down. And so that coach, the head coach now, who maybe was being okay, who's maybe kind of being cool, was maybe trying to be the peacemaker now later in the game, like Tim is saying, is not only vociferously and loudly arguing with you, she's standing up, she's out of the box. You shouldn't even be standing anywhere. And technical foul.
After a coach or a bench personnel gets a technical, the coach loses the coaching box. What are the situations when that coach can stand up?
Spontaneous reaction to a real good play.
Yep.
Timeout request.
Replacing.
Yep, Brent had it, calling a timeout.
Calling timeout or cheering a play?
Yep. Yep.
They
The-
can go to tables,
replace an injured or
ask for
disqualified player.
correctable error.
Yep. Injury, disqualified player. Those are kind of like the other situations that don't happen that often. But yeah. Now, what I will say is I want to share one experience, and I don't share
Hey
this.
Shane, can I add one last thing quick?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Well, and kind of unrelated, but somewhat related. I had a fan removed, but anyway, after the game, the host AD says he's going to walk us out to the car, which is fine. And when he gets us, he's like, "The coach wants to talk to you and ask you something. Are you interested?" And I told him, "No, I'm not going to engage with her."
Yeah. If they want to follow up with you, I like to use the rule that a lot of coaches use with players and parents: 24 hours. Follow up with me in 24 hours. And I that's appropriate. Correct. And they might have been totally polite. They might want to say, "I'm sorry." It's best not to engage and just politely decline and say, "I'm happy to speak with them."
But as you know, I made that phone call with you about a similar situation in the fall, and that was fresh in my mind. So
Yep.
I used what you had told me.
have him get a hold of me in a day and we can talk then. But the one kind of verbal exchange I want to share, it wasn't me, but it was one of my partners, and I just love the response. Kind of kill him with kindness. So lots of times you inform a coach, coach, you've lost the privileges of the coaching box. We need you seated. And what inevitably happens? A play later, they're standing up. Coach, we need you sitting down. And if they continue to not sit down, then you have to say, coach, you need to remain seated. You know, this game can't continue unless you remain seated, or we don't want to have any other issues. And this coach was bold enough to say, what if I don't? And the referee who was standing next
Let's
to him,
find out. Yes.
right? I know me'd be like I wouldn't have said anything. I'd be like, okay, I want to see where this goes. But it was such a wonderful response that I haven't had to use it, but I have it in my quiver, so to speak, if I need to pull out that arrow. He said something along the lines, and I am paraphrasing, Coach, I respect you. I believe you're too professional to have that happen.
There you go.
And that coach, because I saw it, I didn't hear the conversation. I didn't know what the conversation was until after the game, but that coach just kind of sat down and he acquiesced. He gave up. He wasn't in a fighting mood anymore. And I just like the turn of the phrase. That's called verbal judo. He used the coach's threat, what if I don't? And he turned it right against him, to say, Coach, I believe you're too professional for that. And I'm like, okay, that one kind of worked. I like that. So, I want to share now. I have it listed as intentional or flagrant, but again, for those of us whose cameras maybe it come a little bit choppy, there's going to be a steal, a turnover, White's going to get possession, and a kid's going to be going in for a layup. And this is a very dangerous play. This is from a friend of mine down in Tennessee. It's a middle school game, believe it or not. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't be surprised. Crazy stuff happens in middle school games. All right, players going, and watch number one right here. Watch what happens. And I have it in slow motion here. Now, again, I was talking with a person. At the time, it was ruled an intentional foul. I'm here to tell you there is nothing about that is a basketball play. Kid is up in the air. He's in a very defenseless position. He's undercut. He's not going for the ball at all. Middle school, freshman, JV, varsity, that player is disqualified for a flagrant foul. And we don't have any additional film, but when you have a hard foul like that, where you in your brain are thinking about maybe this is a flagrant, maybe it's an intentional. Jim, Rick, you guys want to talk about, if you're the calling official, what you're looking from your partners, what are you going to do next?
So what I do watching that is, was it a basketball play? Was the defender trying to block a shot or make some basketball play? If the answer is no, then your choices are intentional or flagrant. And if it's a non-basketball play and it's violent or dangerous, you go to flagrant.
Yep. Now, if you're with that official who's the calling official, again, these can be very tense, your brain can be going 1,000 miles a minute. Be a good partner. Walk up to him and say, Joe, are you thinking about intentional flagrant? Yeah. I'm thinking that should be a flagrant. What do you think, Jim? From my angle, it didn't look like it was a basketball play, and it looked extremely violent. I would support a flagrant foul call. And, or you give him other information. I don't know. I saw him swiping for the ball. It was hard. It didn't look that dangerous. I think this should be an intentional. What do you think? And that exchange of ideas and information in different angles, can help support that. Rick, you got any thoughts to share about those kinds of
Yeah,
situations?
I think that huddle after a potential intentional or flagrant foul is very valuable. Not only do you get the extra information, but it gives the crowd and the coaches a sense that you're being very thorough and thoughtful about this call. And that's what you want to do if you're considering disqualifying a kid from the game. You better have it right.
Yeah. There is nothing wrong with being dead certain you're going to call a flagrant foul and still touching base with your partners because of that visual. Exactly.
Now, Shane, is a report to the high school association mandated with a flagrant foul?
Excellent question, Rick. Does anybody know the answer to that question? I will answer. I'm not trying to skirt. I'm trying to skirt the question, but I want to see if anybody else knows the answer to that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
A flagrant foul disqualification. Anybody?
Since it's a disqualification, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I fought foul out on 5 fouls. That's a disqualification too. We don't report those.
Correct. But a flagrant foul, we do. 2 technical fouls, we do. Any kind of disqualification like that, that's not just a result of 5 fouls. We have to write a report.
I think
And
the way
it's not optional. It's not optional because that kid, 2 techs or a severe flagrant technical or a flagrant personal foul like this, disqualification, and the penalty is they must sit for the next game.
Yeah,
the way to look
that
at
was
it is,
kind of my point. It's mandated to do this. So you don't
if it's
get an option
ejection,
not to do it.
if it's an ejection, a report is required. A disqualification for getting your 5th foul is just a disqualification. It's not an ejection. Player with 5 fouls can go and sit on the bench and watch the rest of the game.
Yep.
If someone receives 2 technical fouls or a flagrant foul, that is an ejection. They have to leave the gym. That gets reported to the state.
Yep. And that is not one of those where, coach, I respect you. I'm going to let you deal with it. I'm not going to report to the state. No, you report it to the state, and we will send out I'll send out tomorrow, the next day, once the recording gets uploaded, assuming this recording works. There are actually guidance for writing reports. And without going into it in great detail, the short answer is just the facts. For example, you say the coach in a loud voice yelled across the gym to my partner, F off. That is a statement of fact. You don't say the coach appeared agitated. He seemed like he was upset, because now it's supposition. Now, it's subjectiveness. That's not objective factual writing. So that's basically what the reporting guidelines, kind of come down to. You don't guess. You just say what you saw, what was said, and what happened. Think like a police report, or a coroner's report or something like that.
Like on this play here, for instance, we just saw, just say the defender, without making a play on the ball, undercut the offensive player who is attempting a layup in a dangerous manner, or and he fell hard to the floor.
Yep.
It helps if you put a rule reference in your report as well.
Yep.
Like whatever rule they violated, 963 or whatever it is. Yeah.
Hey,
So
Shane, real quick on that one. When you're coming together as a crew, instead of coming in right away and being like, I have an intentional foul or a flagrant foul, come in as a crew and say, this is what I saw. Because you can build up to what the foul should be, right? But if you come in and say, okay, I saw this, he undercut him here, then you can build it as a crew. Okay, this is why it should be this. Or versus I'm coming in, this is a flagrant foul, and now I have to talk my partner down from a flagrant to an intentional, right? So
One thing I want to add here too is, that kid hits the floor, and I don't know if this video clip goes on any further, but when you get a guy hit the floor on contact like that, especially in a high school game, you got to run in there and get between the players right away. Now
And
this trail official way out
I'm
here,
coming up punching.
he can close down, but he should keep a distance and observe everything, take numbers, take name, whatever he needs to do. But the calling official, who's the lead right there, call it and take 3 quick steps in and get, you stand over the player on the ground so he doesn't get up and do anything stupid.
have a
You
presence.
stand and face the other player so a teammate doesn't come in and do something stupid. Get in there.
Let
That's
that player
preventive officiating.
let that player on the ground know we got the foul call. You got free throws coming. Up easy. Use your words to make sure the situation is diffused before you go talk with your partners about what call you're going to make. Good point.
Jim, on
Now,
that
Yeah,
ejection,
And
the
the
player
other-
needs to
other-
leave the gym with adult supervision, correct?
yeah, they have to have adult supervision, correct? Yeah.
The other thing I would add to it, when you get into those potentially hot situations where someone might be angry enough to throw a punch, announce yourself when you get to the group of kids. I'm here, guys. I'm watching.
Yep.
It kind of calms things down.
Make sure everybody knows there is a witness right there to whatever next that they do. All right, now hold on. I am going to show you, and first of all, I'm going to apologize for the video quality. It's a little pixelated, but I'm okay with that because this is at a local school, but it's a great example. If you happen to recognize her, if you know anybody who was involved in the incident, just don't worry about it. But we're going to have a play that's going to be coming towards us, and there's going to be some contact and action. And you'll see it a few times, and I'll just let it play. Okay, White stole the ball. If they went in for a layup, Red's got the ball. They're coming back down. This is second half. Shot. And a couple Red kids shoved the White player who was grabbing the rebound. We got a foul call. Awesome. And then the White kid takes exception to that. And then a couple of the Red kids who thought they were trying to be good Samaritans, one was trying to separate somebody from else. And then a White teammate takes exception. And then this happens. White bench comes off because the White bench is right down here.
Game over.
Game's over. Kids go to the floor. Excuse me, Red bench is here. So the White bench, we had the White bench clear out. They had to come all the way from the other side of the court. Now, these can be, I'm going to say, they can be scary situations. I've been in gyms where there have been fights before, and they can be scary situations. And so when you see a couple people squaring off, like there's a lead right here. He is the only one that has a possibility to short circuit the situation before it gets worse. And he called it, he had another foul. And you step in there, say, don't, stop. You say whatever you have to say.
nothing
But
extra.
But then at some point, you can come in a little bit, but at some point, if there's 3 of you, always have at a minimum one person standing back taking notes. And then once you see as an official that there's nothing you can do, at this point, just get out. Just get out. You see the one official here, he's made that determination. He says, there's nothing I can do. Now I'm either just a target or whatever. So he backs out. The other official hasn't backed out yet. I definitely would have backed out by now. Because again, coaches are there. They're the peacemakers. Let the coaches deal with it. Let the school administrators deal with it. And just get yourself out of the situation. Get yourself to a safe place. And I will say this is why, even when you get out of this situation, over here, it's going to be hard to see, but this fan gets ejected. And he gets the ejection. So these situations, until you're in it, is hard to describe. They can be chaotic and a little unnerving. And there's a tool on there that if there's a bench clearing fight, what are the repercussions, offsetting this or that, what happens? I'll tell you something. It is very difficult to, in the moment, and this is why one person at a minimum has to have the 80,000-foot view and is looking to see, hey, everybody on the white bench, they came off. They're all gonna be ejected. And did anybody come off the red bench? Nope, even though the fight was here. Because see, most of these kids, they're at least staying on their bench, even though that fracas is right there next to them. So, Jim, Rick, comments about. I know both of you have been in situations like this. So do you guys have any tips or tricks of how to handle them?
Well, it's like Shane said, if you can stop it instantly, is this lead official here? If he could have stepped in instantly and, assert himself and been loud, maybe he stops it. Once it starts, don't try to break it up.
Yeah. And
Get out of the way.
Yeah, often it doesn't look like to me like this play caused the problem. It feels to me like something's been going on all game, and this was just the straw that caused people to act out. So sometimes you got to have a read on that game early on. I can almost feel when something bad's going to happen. Like you just have a sense that you can just the tone of how people are acting with one another and the body language after a foul, that type of stuff. You got to watch that. Step in and address it early. Now, it may not stop a fight, but it just might.
Yeah. And to Rick's
you might want to just tell them, hey, look, we don't want we want people playing in your next game.
Yeah.
And, don't do anything.
Yeah. And
you're going to regret.
To Rick's point, last year I was working a game and I gave a kid a technical foul. And I'm like, where in the world did this come from? And I watched the film later and it was on the dead ball immediately before that technical foul when a kid got mad at something that happened on the court. An opposing player whose team was winning, they shared some words, and the winning team kind of pointed up to the scoreboard and gave look at the scoreboard, buddy, we're beating you kind of look. That's where it came from. Anybody who says it came out of nowhere, they just didn't see the first thing. Go ahead, Jim.
One piece of advice, and this is easier to do in a 3-man, but just say you're a table side, either a trail in a 2 or 3-man or center official in a 3-man here. If you can keep the players on their benches, if that's one thing you can do, is just let the couple players on the court have their little shoving match and keep it from escalating. Keep the players on their benches. If that's one thing you can do, is turn around and shout, get back to your bench or whatever. Back off, use your arms, signal. It's a lot easier to handle because the other official or two and the coaches can maybe, and maybe there's a peacemaker or someone on the court too. They can handle the couple players that are starting things. But when it turns into a 15-by-15 fight, that's a problem. So if you can, try to keep the benches on the bench.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Again, this is one of those things where you already have a bad situation. Keep it from getting any worse as best you can. Then the one thing I want to say is that to Rick's point, could have stepped in super quick. I'm going to tell you, this is how quick that lead official would have had to step in to have any hope of stopping this. Right.
It's so
right,
quick. Yeah.
Right there with that push.
A sitter has a foul on the push.
Yep.
Yet he can't get there before it goes south.
Right. With that second.
He actually called the foul.
Yep. With that second dead ball push, this lead would have to jump in right now. Right now. And the moment that moment had passed. Like right now it's too late. Now it's too late. I mean,
You know, if I go into a game and I know there's bad blood between the two teams, the one thing I'm going to say in my pregame to everybody is let's be the best dead ball officials we've ever been, because that's where all this stuff starts, is after the whistle blows and someone elbows somebody or bumps shoulders and stuff like that. You got to in a rivalry game, and that's what's going to be ahead of for a lot of us, is you got to be ready for that. And that means you got to be better than you normally are. And so it takes an extra effort when you got a tough game.
So some tools to help us out in all these situations. Some of this is on the MHSAA page, but we try to have it here for a little extra, just kind of convenience. Again, MetroDetroitAthleticOfficials.com in the address bar. If you're on a desktop, just hover over basketball and you can click on fights. Notice I put it at the top of the list. Shocker why. If you're on your phone, same thing. What you'll see is a little plus symbol in the upper right-hand corner of your mobile device. Click that, click basketball, click fights. And you go here, and we have this is a point of emphasis. It was from some years ago, but it still is relevant. We also have an officials reporting guide. This is on the MHSA website. And this is if you email somebody up at the state asking for tips, this is what they're going to send you. Keep it simple, simple language, write in properly formed paragraph. A quote is a quote. Don't be shy if a coach, and again, this is YouTube, I'm going to mark it not safe for kids. If a coach tells you to fuck off and die, you write, coach told me to fuck off and die. And you use the quote. I don't care how bad it is. Basic facts, describe what happened, accurately report the role of you and your partners, and proofread the report, for heaven's sake. Put in Microsoft Word or something, spell check, because copy that report, often will get shared with ADs, etc. And then finally, this is a tool that somebody, I believe it was from the west side of the state or maybe Kalamazoo area, kind of created. It does a nice job of going through all of the scenarios where we got two people fighting. What's the resumption of play? This case, two people fight. That's it. Opposing teams, they're ejected. Play resumes at POI, point of interruption. We have, same thing. 4 players in a fight, 2 on each side. Again, play resumes, point of interruption. Now we have offsetting, 2 and 1. And then you have 2 free throws for team A because they only had the 1 ejection, disqualification, and the other 2, they don't offset. It's not like in football where you can have 8 penalties on the defense and 1 penalty on the offense, live ball penalties, and they all offset. This is not like that. You unless it's an even amount on each side, it will be resulting in at least some technical fouls. So what I'm going to recommend is read through these, look through these, read the definition of a flagrant intentional foul, etc. in the definition of the rule book, section 4, I believe. You'll thank yourself, because none of us go into a game expecting something like this is going to happen. And this is why we go over it now, is so even if you've never experienced it, you'll at least have that academic knowledge to lock it in and know for sure what you're going to do and how you're going to adjudicate it. See, those were the only videos and points that I wanted to share about, fight technical fouls, intentional fouls. Does anybody have any questions about those situations?
Yes,
Shane,
I
I
have
had
a question for you, Shane.
Yeah, Tim, we'll go you second. Who's the other one?
Okay.
Steve.
Oh, Steve. Okay, cool.
So going back to the first play at Berkeley that you had, the technical foul was at the end of the quarter. So it was after time had elapsed, the technical foul is called. My question is, how do you adjudicate that? Is it going to be 2 free throws at the beginning of the second period? And then let's say that blue had the possession arrow. How do you work with that? Are you gonna give blue the ball and keep the possession arrow on blue, or does it change when the ball's inbounded?
That is a great question. That is a great question. And I wish I had double checked in the moment to ask. And so I'm kind of looking around for anybody else. This is where if I was in that situation, I would want to double check for my partners, make sure. Jim, Rick, am I correct in that the clock has expired? We are saying that this is a technical foul in between the first and second period, and we would begin the second period with free throws.
That's correct.
And then the blue team would get the ball. And this is where whoever's on the side with the table really has to say, blue gets the ball, do not touch the arrow. The arrow stays the same direction.
They're getting the ball as part of the penalty for the technical foul. The arrow remains unchanged.
Now, that same rule is not the same at the end of the game.
Correct.
So between the first and second quarter, yep. During halftime, between second and third quarter, yep. Third and fourth quarter, you start the fourth quarter with free throws, etc. At the end of the game, if it matters, if it's a 20-point game, doesn't matter. But even if you got to call it, but if it matters, you shoot it before overtime. And if it decides the game, it decides the game. It is what it is. Other than that, so good question, Steve. Tim?
Okay, I had a situation. I think it was in December when we had Friday the 13th, and it was certainly a very ominous day. But anyway, the situation was A1 is followed by B1, common garden variety foul, no big deal. Well, A1 decides to turn and push B1, which is a technical foul for intentional dead ball contact. And after that happens, B2 is excited that Team A has gotten a technical foul. So he goes up to the Team A player. I don't sure if it's A1 or A2, claps in his face. So that's a technical foul for taunting. And this is the part I think my partner and I kicked. We got together and discussed it. And we reasoned that since we had two technical fouls from the opposite teams during a dead ball, they offset each other. But I think the rule is for a false double technical, you would actually shoot the two free throws for each side and go with whoever penalized last.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, I'll let you get into it, but I'll let you respond.
Yeah. So yeah, Tim, you just explained it correctly, but for people who don't know, so if let's just say after the ball was dead, well, looking at this picture, let's call it A4 and B4. The ball handler and defender are both number 4. Get in a shoving match after the clock expires. It's a dead ball. It's a double technical because the fouls were against each other. In that circumstance, you're not shooting free throws. That's a ordinary double technical foul. However, as Tim explained it, you had, well, let's just say this. All right, let's watch this one here.
Yeah.
All right.
So, yep.
Darren gives a technical to one player.
And maybe one of
Let's
these
just say he
guys.
walks over to center court, and then someone on the blue bench, does something to earn a technical foul. That is what's called a false double foul situation because there's a foul on each team, but they didn't happen against each other on the same play. They happened during the same dead ball period, but not against each other.
And in turn, a double foul are fouls by opponents against one another at approximately the same time.
And that's a
Tim,
rule.
Yeah, that's a rule book definition. I'm not reading it, but that's my recollection of it. Tim, what you described was 3 separate acts. There was a common foul, an dead ball contact foul, then an unsporting foul for taunting. So you'd shoot them in the order of occurrence and give the ball to the team that was offended after the second free throw.
Yeah. Now, let me ask both of you
set of
this.
free throws.
I have fallen, I don't want to say into this trap, but there are times where I've had that exact same situation. And I often, perhaps it's, I don't know if it's out of laziness or convenience or whatever you want, if they're close enough that I can argue that they were at the same time, I usually just go with point of interruption. But per rule, the way Tim described it, those three separate acts, two unsportsmanlike dead ball penalties during the same dead ball that don't occur at the same time, false technical foul or double.
Like,
Jim's right. It's a false double because
Okay.
one of the attributes of a double is missing, and that it didn't happen at the same time.
yeah, and it's the same thing, like Rick says, is approximately the same time. So let's just say two players were in each other's face, and one said, fuck you, and the other said, no, fuck you. Well, that's close. You know, they weren't at exactly the same time. That's at approximately the same time. That situation you'd call the double technical and not shoot. But the one Tim explained, it was like, you know, one person hit a contact technical foul, a dead ball contact push, and then several seconds later, someone came and clapped in someone's face. So they're really separate acts. They weren't part of the same.
If they're distinct and separate, they're distinct and separate.
Yeah.
I do want to say two things I totally forgot during this clip is again, if you're not the calling official or if you're not administering the balls, you know, during this dead ball situation, things just got heated. Maybe it was two players and there's some bad blood. When the free throws are being shot, this one's okay. I'm going to jump in time here. This one's okay. Coach calls him over. He wants to talk to him. And then this team is over here and they are by themselves. That's fine. But sometimes teams can intermingle during this free throw situation. You want to have a presence. And you don't want things to escalate. You want to be there and you just want to say, I walked up and it's just said, hey guys, and I just stand there. Now, I think most of us know this, but just a quick reminder. Where must the non-shooting players be? Do
Behind
they
the
have
three-point
to
arc.
have- Tim, what would you have?
Behind the 3-point arc.
Bingo. So it's just like a regular free throw. They have to be behind the 3-point arc, free throw line extended. It is a myth that teams have to be at half court. Imagine a scenario where the red team coach wants to get in some extra timeout talking, and this player or this coach, instead of pleading his case to Rick and Jim's partner, wants to call the white team over past a half court line to also have a timeout. That's perfectly acceptable. You know,
As
and
long as
that's
they're
probably
above the
why the
foul
rules
line
written like that.
and outside the 3-point line.
Yep. So don't ever keep that coach from calling his team over to have a quick timeout, calm him down, do whatever it is they need to do. That's acceptable. So sorry about that one. Forgot that one earlier. It's 7:07. I do want to leave a little bit of time for Jim to go through. I'll stop sharing now. What it takes to get ahead. If you have a desire to have better games, you know, all those kinds of things, Jim's just going to go through a few things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people come up to me and they'll ask me, "Hey, what's it take to get games in the Catholic League? How do I get into the Catholic League? Or how can I get, varsity games from Bob? All he gives me are JV, or all he gives me are girls. I'd like to work boys varsity." And that might be about any assigner. Um, so here's just a few tips to help. And the first, know who you're working for. You're working for the assigner. They're your boss. You got to keep them happy. So, as you hear every meeting, keep your arbiter up to date. Accept your assignments promptly. Don't let them sit there because it says you must accept by, January 31. Well, don't wait till, 11:59 p.m. on January 31 to accept them. And when you get an assignment, honor it. You know, you might not have wanted to work, the Berkeley girls JV game, but that's your game. And don't decide, well, I have something better I could do, or I can work a game closer to home. Maybe you live out in Milford and say, well, I can work a church league closer to home. If you accept a game, keep it, because a lot of people, they'll ask me, can you put in a word with Bob? And I'll go, and this has happened many, I can't tell you how many people this has been the answer. And it's not just with Bob, it's with Mike Evoy, Gary Wagenschutz, Malcolm Pennington. You'll say, hey, how come you won't give, Joe Schmo, he really would like to work some varsity games for you. And the response I get invariably from these assigners is, well, I give him games and then he doesn't accept them. Or I give him the game and he turns it back. You don't do yourself any favors doing that. Now, I'll tell you one exception. Let's just say you're a JV official and you get a call from a different assigner. Says, hey, can you work? I need someone to work a varsity game here. If you were to call Bob Check and say, hey, I have an opportunity to work a varsity game, in the Southeast Conference, can you let me off this JV game? Bob will do it. He'll hem and haw, he'll let you off, because the assigners want to give you opportunities to advance. So that's a situation where, yeah, you can turn back a game, but do it after asking. The assigners will let you off for a game at a higher level, a varsity instead of a JV, or for instance, maybe Malcolm Pennington calls you and says, would you like to work a PSL playoff game? Are you available on this day? And just, you tell them, say, hey, I've got a varsity game for Bob. Let me just check with him first. And they'll let you off. The assigners will let you off to do, games, playoff games, or higher level games. Don't just give back games because they're too far away or they're not the level you want to be working. You got to honor your commitments. Because assigners have long memories. They remember the officials that repeatedly give back games. They remember the ones that don't accept games. That, oh, I don't want to work. I live in Rochester. I don't want to work a game at Southfield. It's too far away. They remember who declines those games. You make yourself what's called a high maintenance official, and you won't get ahead that way. And that's for every assigner. That is true for every single assigner.
Jim, is
Yeah.
another reason that would be acceptable to turn back a game is, generally speaking, family issues, family emergencies.
Family and work.
Yep.
I've given back games basically for those reasons. Hey, Bob, I can't make this 4 o'clock game. I've got to be in court at 3. I don't think I'm gonna be out on time. Or I just got a shift at it. I can't work on this day. Assigners understand that. That's
Jim,
yeah.
the one thought that kept bubbling in my head as you were talking, the number one ability for an official is availability. And so often when I've had the same experience and I go to the assigner, he goes, well, he's only open on every other Tuesday. And it's hard for them to fit you into their schedule if you don't have a lot of availability. Different people do it different ways. I've always ran my schedule. Everybody is open to every date, and I close them as I get games.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing now, all right, you have a game. Show up on time. On time really should be for a varsity game about an hour ahead of time, but certainly at least 45 minutes. And obviously, if you have a 4 o'clock game, you might have a job that gets in the way, but 30 minutes ahead of, a 4 o'clock, game, is something that's acceptable. If you show up late, the athletic directors will start calling the assigners, and complaining. I don't have any officials here. And the athletic directors and the assigners will remember who shows up late. And that, for instance, in the varsity game, that can be a problem because one of the things people want to do is get better tournament assignments and advance farther in the state tournament. Well, the athletic directors and the leagues have a say in who advances. And if you are, in their mind, a high maintenance official, you might not get recommended, because they view you as unreliable. Now, things come up where you might run late. Well, with Arbiter, you've got all your partners' cell numbers available to you, and hopefully you have the Arbiter app on your phone. You can just point and click and text them or call them and let them know. Or you can call the athletic director and say, hey, I'm going to be a late arrival today. I'm not going to get off work until this time, but I'll be there. I would tell you this about Arbiter. Don't trust the contact information for schools in the Arbiter. Look it up on the MHSA website, because the schools don't update their information. A lot of times they have, for instance, the athletic director listed who's been retired for 4 years on Arbiter. So,
Jason, are you still listed there at Rochester Adams?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well, Bob downloaded all that information 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hasn't been touched since.
Networking is part of advancing. Go to the meetings like you are now. Go to the in-person meetings. Go to camps in the summer, because those, not only will you learn something to work on your skills as an official, but they get your name and face in front of assigners, in front of the clinicians who are friends with assigners. And word of mouth has a lot to do with, particularly for younger and newer officials who can, advance and move up.
Jim, I just want to make 2 points I want to share about my own personal experience real fast along those lines. Showing up, doing your job, being professional, that is an important component of it. But the mistake I made early in my career, I simply didn't introduce myself to enough people. I was painfully shy. I would just show up in the meetings, I'd sit in the back, and I'd leave. And it doesn't have to be much, but just walk up to Bob, especially if you've never met him, especially if you have met him. Do it a couple times. Hey, Bob, I don't know if you remember me. My name's Shane. Would love to get some games from you. I'm working hard, and any opportunity you got, I'm looking forward to it. It can be that quick. But introduce yourself, put yourself out there a little bit, and don't and being good official, being professional, showing up, taking care of your business, that's one. But then you got to kind of, nothing wrong with a little bit of self-promotion. And I have another point, but Jim, you want to jump on that
Well,
one?
I was just going to say, along the lines of Shane, introducing yourself to Bob or Gary Wagenschutz. If you want to get head ahead with those guys, start officiating baseball. That'll help your basketball career too with those guys.
And the second part I want to highlight is, Jim, this was probably the best advice you ever gave me. When I was just starting off and I was just starting to get some varsity games and I was doing some lower level college, which I don't do anymore, I only worked for one assigner. And the smartest thing that, it was Jim's comment. Jim's like, they're like financial investments. You want to diversify at least a little bit, because assigners come, they go, they retire, their contract isn't renewed. And if that was your only person that you got games from, now you might be a little SOL. And especially if you are wanting to move up and through the tournament, the more names that you can the more lists that your name can show up on for recommendations for the state tournament, the better. How does that happen? Who puts in recommendations? Associations, athletic directors and leagues, and assigners. And so the more assigners you work for, the more associations, and again, you don't have to join 10 associations, but the more people that you know in different associations and the more leagues you're willing to work. For example, I live in Troy, work in Pontiac. I would be perfectly content if I only worked OAA, but I drive over and I do some MAC games. I'll do the Kensington Lakes games. I'll go wherever for Catholic League. And again, it's about making yourself available to multiple entities. Jim, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make those points.
No, that's very true. And I think I remember telling Shane that I told a lot of officials that. I mean, I can remember I had just advanced to varsity, was getting, varsity games in the MAC. And Art Zisk was the assigner. Well, the next year he wasn't the assigner. Someone new took over, Dan O'Grady, who didn't know me from a hill of beans, and suddenly I wasn't getting any varsity games in the MAC. There have been, I guess, 3 assigners in the MAC, 3 in the OAA, and the PSL is probably on about the 4th and 5th assigner since I started working in that league. The Catholic League's probably on about the 4th assigner as well. Assigners come and go, and your schedule could be gone with an assigner. So yeah, work as many leagues as you can. Moving on to away from some of the off-court things. On the court, spend time in the rule book. Really, anytime something happens where you don't know if you administered the rule correctly, when you get home, look it up in the rule book and the case book. Because if you find the right answer, you'll never make you'll never make a mistake on that rule again. If you can't find the answer, well, call one of us trainers. We'll help you out.
I
And
love getting those
guide
calls.
you
I
with
love
where to
getting those
go
text
on the
messages.
rules.
Absolutely.
It helps me get myself back in the rule book, and I talk you through a situation and I look it up, and that helps me, and I know Jim and Rick feel the same way.
I'm amazed to this day how many officials, including veteran varsity officials, don't know what traveling is or what it isn't, or don't understand when team control begins and ends. And what I'm getting at is you've got to know your definitions, which are Rule 4 of the rule book, because if you can commit to memory and understand what everything in Rule 4 means, the rest of the rules will fall into place because they're all based on those definitions in Rule 4. So many things depend on where there's team control. An over and back foul, a closely guarded count, 3 seconds. I mean, there's lots of things that depend on whether there's, team control, whether you're shooting free throws or not on a particular type of foul. You need to know those definitions. So learn them. And as John Hartley pointed out, is enforce all the rules. Don't pick and choose, which ones you want to enforce. They're all rules, whether you agree with them. Some of them are stupid and can result in absurd results, but if you have to make a call, you've got to know the rule. And I think one that John talks about is just well, let's move on from that a minute. John talks about knowing the rules and enforcing them all, but let's just take, for instance, the uniform rule, and I'll get to that in my next major point after the rules, is learn how to manage people. And one of the things you want to do and understand is know that everyone's showing up there to watch their kids or their friends or a superstar player play basketball. No one's there to watch you. So don't make yourself the show. There are officials out there that if a kid's uniform is out, will make some bold announcement, and hey, shout out, hey, number whatever, tuck your uniform in, or will make a big showy scene of someone having their uniform up untucked. Well, or they might spend a minute in their pregame with the coaches and captains talking about uniforms. Well, there are a lot more important things in the game of basketball than whether someone's uniform accidentally comes untucked. So, yeah, it's a rule you have to enforce, but how do you enforce it? Well, when there's a dead ball, you walk up to the player and you say, hey, can you help me with your shirt?
Deal with the offense with the appropriate level of forcefulness that the situation calls for.
And a shirt doesn't require a lot of forcefulness. Just a reminder, hey, help me out with your shirt. Can you tuck your shirt in, please? Now, if you tell a kid that and he gives you the one finger I'll tuck in, this 1 inch in front of my shirt, well, all right, now he's made it into a situation where there's a scene, and maybe you direct the kid to the bench or get a little more forceful with him and make more of a scene. But that's his choice for being a jerk, not yours for trying to politely enforce a quiet rule. But people notice if the game is played with illegal uniforms. A few years back, one of my partners was working a PSL game, and Henry Ford was playing, and all their players had rainbow headbands on, sweatbands around their head. Of course, a rainbow headband is not legal, which if you read your rule book, you know that. Well, the crew let them play, and of course, on the cover of the Free Press sports section the next day was a big photo from the game where there were like 3 Henry Ford players, and their headbands were plainly visible. And Nate Hampton at the MHSAA put a call into the assigner that morning. Who was officiating this game? If you ignore rules, they can come back to bite you. Even what you and I agree might agree are minor rules about uniforms. You got to enforce it. Now, you don't have to enforce it like a jerk. You can enforce it quietly and politely, but you can't pick and choose. We talked a little bit about early on about some of the tools, Rick mentioned, in dealing with sportsmanship issues, whether it's a discussion, an official warning, a technical foul. Managing people and managing the game requires you to use all the tools in your toolbox. And it depends on the situation. It depends on your own personality. And it depends on the personalities of the people you're managing. Some people aren't comfortable, speaking to coaches. They just, don't do well, get nervous. Well, if you can't do it, then just give the warning or give the technical foul. If it's not part of your own skill set, those interpersonal skills, use the other tools if you have to. Don't be afraid to give a technical foul. I had the opportunity a year ago to work a football game with Mark Ewell, and he sat down with our crew at the restaurant after the game, and we're just talking officiating, because Mark Ewell is an official at heart. And he talked about things, and he said, when officials don't give technicals, they're hurting themselves in the game. Or when they don't file reports, if they're afraid to eject someone, they're just hurting themselves in the game, because everything's on video now. Everything gets back, whether it gets back to the assigner, the athletic director, or the MHSAA. If something funky happens in a game and you haven't taken care of business, people are going to hear about. People in positions of authority over you are going to hear about it. So don't be afraid, because some people are afraid, well, I don't want to get a bad rating. Well, that's the wrong attitude. Your worst ratings are going to get dropped by the MHSAA when they calculate your average to determine, what you're eligible for in the tournament. And they don't split hairs between someone who has a 3.8 rating and a 3.9 rating. That's not going to make a bit of difference in how the MHSAA views you. They're going to remember you when there is a fight and a superstar athlete runs across the court and throws a punch, and you don't eject him. They're going to remember that. When they get a video from a parent or a coach wondering why wasn't this addressed, they're going to remember that, and they're going to look and see who was on the game.
Hey, Jim, just a
Yeah.
heads up. We're at 7:30
Yeah.
right now. Do you have any real quick, like off season or in season, like training tips? Like attending a camp, watching yourself on video. If you have trouble speaking to people, watching videos about how to speak to people in tense situations.
Any of these self-help things can work for you. When I went to early camps, just looking at yourself in the mirror, doing your mechanics, giving your signals can help. Going to camp, I strongly urge. I mean, I went to camp probably 5 or 6 straight years, different camps. And it helps your game, and it helps you make those connections. And the other thing I do is, when those rule books come every year, I make time to read them. Might be bathroom reading, might be whatever, but I go through the rule book every year just to refresh myself before the season starts.
And again, I'm just going to say, from somebody who's been doing it in the area for a long time, you can tell who's getting better one year after another and is looking to move up. They're watching themselves on video. They've maybe gone to a camp. I know sometimes those can be expensive depending upon, but you can still go to some of our trainings that are free, that kind of stuff. And all I have to say is, I've watched the individual grow over the last 7 years. He could barely do a middle school game. And now I have the pleasure of watching him work one of my kids' games on the varsity level. And I was so happy he was there. He did an excellent job. But he's constantly improved every single year because he's doing these things. And now, if you're like, I'm going sub varsity, I'm happy to be home early, make a couple extra bucks. I love, helping the kids, learn at that level. That is awesome. But if you want to get better and move up, these are some excellent tips for how to do that. Yeah.
Any questions?
Yep. Any questions right now or anything? Well, again, with that said, part of the ways to get better is being here, and I commend every single one of you who were able to show up and had availability to log on. You didn't have to, but you made the conscious choice to do so. And if you're watching us on YouTube, same thing. Maybe you were working a game, maybe you had a family thing, but I appreciate you taking the time, sticking it out, and watching us, and we hope you learned something. Rick, you got anything? Oh, maybe Rick dropped off. But With that said, I'm going to end the recording, everybody. Good luck wherever you're going this week or for the remainder of the month. Please stay warm. It's dangerous out there, and love y'all guys. You do good work. Have a good one.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.